reason I love museums so much is because it's the closest that we'll get in our lifetime to travelling back in time to a place where things were so much more simple and less processed and everything was real, fake bullshit. Beautiful. Well, except from all the poo that they would chuck out the windows. These dolls always used to creep the hell out of me when I was little. It's funny, it used to smell rancid in this room, and I got used to it. I've been in here. Really old photo card. Beautiful. Do anything to go back in time. This bike, I think, used to be over here. It's an engine bike. Oh, here we are. We do not know exactly why the roads developed as they did, but here are some possibilities. There's no right answer. There is often more than one reason why things happen. Defense against attacks. Great Yarmouth has always been open to attacks from the sea. The narrow alleyways, the roads were easy to defend. It said that one man with shot and powder would be able to make the resistance against 20. And here we have the exterior of this wonderful museum. I remember coming here all the time as a kid and just having so much fun. Always reminded me of Doctor Who, being able to go in time and experience what it was like to live as other people's lives and how they lived. It's magnificent. Now if you go here, you can't smell it because it's a video, but you can actually smell what it would smell like to work in a factory. The sound of constant shuttering and the smell of sulphur. In fact, most factory workers would often inhale the sulphur, and the same as coal miners would end up with lung disease due to working in a factory for all of their lives. But back then, jobs were so short, that was the only option for people to work. Now, Great Yarmouth is not famous, but it's famous for its fish. Great Yarmouth used to be a huge fishing port. In fact, this used to be one of the houses of fish in the late 1800s, and mid 1950s. And then I think in the 80s it was converted. Maybe not the 80s. Maybe the 90s or 80s. It was converted into a museum, and now we have all of this beautiful history. You go in here, you can actually see how they would hang them up. So what they would do is you'd have a couple of people. You'd have one person at the bottom handing the fish. They would skewer the fish on one of these little poles, and then once they had done that, they would make sure that the fish wouldn't fall off, obviously, and then they would hand them to the person up there who would, I imagine, would have to climb and put their foot between the different bits of wood to hang the fish and to dry them. And so that's why even today, the smokehouse, as they call it, can still smell like fish. It's really fascinating history. And just to really give you the picture, what the museum has done is they've put a bunch of these paper fish You can't see it because I haven't got my flashlight on. But in fact, I'll show you when we get up there, because there's a separate room that shows you. But they had a bunch of fish on the top, just to really alliterate how much they were. And this is how they would have them. On little sticks, skewered like that. So they'd hang them out to dry and, properly fished. Here we have a short history of the boats and paintings that go with the boats. In fact, these paintings are gorgeous. And in fact, I'll just, my camera's not big enough because it's only a phone. Here we are. At the height of the autumn fishing industry, over 6,000 Scottish fisher girls worked at Great Yarmouth during the season. The girls gutted and salted herring. The herring fishery had a distinctive Scottish flavour. A large Scottish fishing fleet followed the herring shoals along the east coast every year. An army of Scots fisher girls followed the fleet from port to port. Scottish women of all ages made this annual journey south, whether young or old. They were always called girls. Scots girls brought life to the quayside, laughing and singing as they worked. When we're not gutting herring, the girls kept their nimble fingers busy by knitting. Fisher girls were highly skilled. Their razor-sharp knives moved at lightning speeds, gutting up to 60 herring every minute. They worked in teams of 3. 2 girls gutted the herring, while the other packed them into barrels. In all weathers, the girls spent between 12 and 15 hours working each day. For this, they were given a weekly wage which paid for their food and their lodgings. At the end of the season, they were also paid a lump sum by the curing firm for filling barrels. And then there's the girls afterwards, or the girls knitting to keep their fingers nimble. It's a rather large painting. I have to sort of pan over it. This painting, if I can do that, is by John Moore, who lived from 1820 to 1902. The painting is called Boats on a Shore and was painted in 1860. Born in Woodbridge, Suffolk, John Moore was an apprentice to his father's business and initially began painting only as a hobby. He was strongly influenced by the Suffolk School and spent most of his career painting scenes of the East Coast. So this really happened. It shows you how much skill that John Moore had. The fact that he could capture history as it was happening. It was truly beautiful. And here are some of the famous boats that have been used throughout Yarmouth's history and some of the gear that was used on those boats. Let's go upstairs. Yeah, no. Let's use the stairs. I hate lifts. Hate them. Ugh. Now, as we go up, we'll find a lot more older history than the 1800s. Downstairs is focused on recent, modern history. And so upstairs is focused on not ancient history, but very old history. However, here's a little tidbit on the Norfolk Giant. The Norfolk Giant, Robert Hales, the Norfolk Giant, was born in the village of West Somerton near Great Yarmouth on the 2nd of May, 1820. He became known as the largest man in the Western world. In his prime, Robert reached 7 feet 6 inches high. He measured 160 centimetres around his chest and 160 centimetres around the waist. He weighed more than 33 stone. Robert came from a tall family. His father was 6 feet 6 inches and his mother was 6 feet. His sister Mary was 7 feet 2 inches in height and weighed 16 stone in weight. Robert Hales became famous. He was treated like a modern-day celebrity. He'd made a good living by travelling around the country, showing off his physique. Hale's fame increased when he was received at the court by Queen Victoria. Hales and his sister Mary were part of the same show. They travelled to most of the large towns in England, including many visits to Norwich and Great Yarmouth. In 1848, Hales went to America to join Barnum and Bailey's circus. He returned to England in 1851. Robert Hales died in 1863 at the age of 43 years old. He is buried in a giant-sized stone tomb at Somerton Churchyard. Now this is the actual size of the Norfolk Giant. Now this chap is ginormous. I mean, his hands compared to mine. I mean, look, his stick comes to about my neck. That's a pretty big fellow. And just in case you can't get a full picture, he was a rather large man. Now, if we go through here, we have the origins in the Neolithic era. It's rather quiet today, actually. Anyway. Oh, actually, I'll show you the fishing first, that I was on about downstairs. Here they've got a bunch of glass fish caught in a sort of net. But if you look up, you will see, I don't know if you can see them, but there are a bunch of fish. Well, not real fish, obviously, but plastic, paper, 2D fish. Now, this focuses on about 1 million years ago. So yes, actually ancient history. Almost 1 million years ago, a group of prehistoric people rested in a river floodplain. The remains they left are the earliest evidence of human activity in northwest Europe. They were discovered north of Great Yarmouth. The East Anglian coast is being eroded. Houses and farmland are being lost. However, as the cliffs are eaten away by the sea, they reveal evidence of human activity from long ago. Since the mid-1800s, flint tools have been regularly found along the Norfolk coast. These belong to early hunters who visited the British Isles. Until recently, it was thought that people first came to Britain about 550,000 to 700,000 years ago. Most of the flint tools in the area are from around that time. However, recent discoveries show that humans visited Britain much, much earlier. The site lay in the valley of the ancient River Thames. It was home to deer, voles, and beavers, as well as mammoths, bison, and hyenas. About 1 million years ago, the climate was similar to northern Europe's today. Prehistoric people stayed at the site long enough to rework pieces of flint before moving on in search of game. And this is a prehistoric man. Very hairy guy. And this is the Norfolk, they call it the Norfolk Hoard, I think. Gorston Hoard, sorry, not the Norfolk, the Gorston Hoard. These are all ancient tools that were found in Gorston. And these were used thousands of years ago. In fact, this is believed to be, or looks to be, a dagger from thousands and thousands of years ago. I mean, and the fact that it is so clearly distinct is amazing. I mean, look at that. I mean, back then, the craftsmanship was absolutely impeccable. I mean, you can tell that is a dagger, even back then. The Gorston Hoard. Fascinating. These are all Bronze Age weapons. That was Bronze Age. Sometimes I wonder what happened to humans. We're so thick now. Back then, we were so clever. You know? Here we have a little bit later, in the Roman period. In 43 AD, Great Yarmouth did not exist. The site lay under water. People would not live here for another 1,000 years. However, this was still an important location. People were attracted to the area by natural resources. It was a focus for both local and long-distance trade. When the Romans invaded Britain, sea levels were much higher than they are today. The site of Great Yarmouth lay at the mouth of the vast estuary, which opened out into Norfolk Sea. The area where the Halvergate Marshes now stand was tidal mud flats. The districts of Flegg and Lothian were islands in the great estuary. I'm just going to say estuary, I don't know. This is obviously replica, but this is what they would have worn, and it's very heavy. This is chainmail armour. This is what they would have worn during the Roman times on crusades and battles and wars. And here we have this chainmail and a helmet, what would be one of their helmets. And if we move along here, we'll find we're into the Saxon era. And this is what they would have had. If you were rich and powerful and one of the, emperors, this is the sort of stuff you would have eaten. You would have had fresh onions. You would have had, I don't know what the hell that is. You would have had, I don't know what that is. You would have had fresh, juicy fruit made available at all times. You would have had sort of breads and fish and pork and gammon and mushrooms and grapes and all that lovely, lovely stuff. However, if you were poor, then that's a whole other story. Now this is very fascinating. This is the head of a very, very old statue. And the fact that it's still in such great condition now, although as you can see it's very broken, it's still in very great condition. It's truly impeccable how it's lasted this long. And this is called the Head of Britannia, named in 1860. These fragments are what remains of an early figure of Britannia, which stood on top of Nelson's monument. Oh, this is only 100 years old. No, 203 years old. Built in 1819, this monument stands today in the South Denes area of Great Yarmouth. The original figure was considered unsafe in 1860. This is either the repaired original or a replacement of that date. So this is possibly 200 years old, if it's the original. If it's the original, that makes this older than your nan. No, but this could be 200 years old. Imagine being able to look and touch something that is, older than 5 generations of family. That's creepy. I don't know why that's just panned out. This is their sort of animal part. You've got. Now, this isn't a real fish, obviously. This is a replica, but this is one of the largest fish caught in Yarmouth. And as you can see, these are some rather old replicas, and these is an ancient species of, I want to say tortoise or turtle. I think turtle. I don't know. But it's an ancient species that was so large it could not exist today. It just couldn't. And these are some beautiful birds. As you see, there's a budgie. I thought I saw a hummingbird, but no. I only know a budgie. But, all these animal remains are just so amazing. And I'll go back to the rose in a minute, actually, because there were some really old books that they used as props. They need to get that light fixed. Really old books that they used as props. But they were actual books that were from the 1800s. Now, if we go from here, we'll go to sort of more modern times. I think as you progress through the museum, you get closer and closer to present day. Now this is a very lovely mirror, and my hair is never normal, is it? Anyway, this is what Britannia Pier looked like 10 years ago. Wellington Pier, sorry. No, this is like a little scaled down model of Yarmouth seafront about 10 years ago. And here we have some old plates, some from the late 18th century, so 1700s, 1800s, and this would have been 1900s, which is just amazing. I mean, this is 100 years old, this is 200 years old, and these are 300 years old. Well, it's late, but still, it's incredible, really, how history has preserved them, and that's very dangerous. Anyway, we have some more lovely paintings here. In fact, I think it's absolutely beautiful how the painter, who is unknown, has managed to capture the ferocity and the sheer violence of a wave and a storm. As you can see, the waves sort of flutter with such ferociousness that it is quite worrying. And here's some of the gear that they would have used before modern times to actually indicate and map out where they were going. It's quite fascinating. This is just a cool looking chest. I'd be terrified if that knocked back. This is astrology. And if we go from here, we will go through some of the saddest parts of our human history. As we see, this focuses on World War I and World War II. It was a very scary time in both World Wars. I mean, you didn't know if you were going to make the next day alive, which is very, very sad. And in fact, in World War I, they were just getting mustard gas and, sort of really amateur bioweapons. And so they had to fashion their own out of materials from home, because no one could afford it, they're on rations. They had to fashion their own sort of gas masks that barely ever worked, but they had hope. And that's what's important. They had hope. And hope is all they needed. Here we are. Here's some history for you. On the 25th of April 1916, Great Yarmouth was on the receiving end of a major naval bombardment. Lowestoft and Great Yarmouth had been selected as targets by the German forces, whose strategic raids upon the British coastline were an attempt to lure the British naval fleet into battle in conditions that were advantageous to the Germans. I can't read that. The attack began on the evening of the 24th of April with the Zeppelins leading an air raid, while battle cruisers made their way towards Norfolk coast at daybreak. On the 25th of April, German battle cruisers opened fire on Lowestoft, destroying 200 houses in 10 minutes and killing 3 people. The attack then moved to Yarmouth. However, with fog restricting visibility, only a few shells were fired. During this raid, the Gorton and Southtown gasworks were hit under Zeppelin fire. The large metal tanks containing gas were damaged. The resulting bullet holes, allowed gas to escape and threatened an explosion that would have been catastrophic for the surrounding area. Having witnessed the attack from home on Southtown Road, Walter Paul, assistant manager of the gasworks, was aware of the danger and risked his life to avert the potential disaster. Filling a bucket with mud, he ascended a ladder and plugged the holes in with gas tanks. His heroic actions were recognised with an award of an OBE presented on May 14, 1918 by the Earl of Leicester on behalf of King George V. A new order of knighthood that was created in 1917, Walter Paul was an early civilian recipient of an OBE. Fascinating. This is what they used in World War II, because everyone was so panicked. I mean, World War I was gigantic, but World War II cranked that up to beyond 1,000. And so what they did, because they were so scared of a bombardment of bombs or a surprise attack, they would have these cages over their bed, or even use these if they couldn't afford one for a bed. And so if, I don't know, their houses were bombed, this was sturdy enough that if the ceiling were to come down, they would be sort of safe. They wouldn't have had to deal with any of the head trauma or getting knocked out and having to breathe in and slowly suffocate because of the asbestos that they used at times. And these are some of the helmets that they used during the Second and First World War. Oh no, sorry, just the Second World War. Depending on who you were, that's the helmet you would have. Very fascinating. And here we have early modern history. You've got the Teletubbies chilling. Oh, sit down. Oh, here we have an old telephone from, I'm going to guess, the 80s. Let's try calling them. It don't work. Oh well. Oh. Now here we have stuff from the 60s and upwards. Here we have the Teletubbies. Stuff like really old, what would now be old, in fact 50s, not just 60s, but really old products for your kitchen, you know. Here's some old TV ads. And here we have some of the old toys. You've got the Rubik's Cube. You've got, I don't know what that's doing there, that's from 2008, maybe 7. You've got E.T., you've got Barbie. In fact, here are some old bands. You've got Michael Jackson, you've got Saturday Night Fever, you've got the Freddie Mercury, you've got Ray Parker Jr., you've got Blondie, you've got all the great ones, apart from Queen. I don't know why Queen's not on there. Here's a bike from the 80s, or maybe the 60s, I think 60s actually. Yes. Okay, so as I said earlier, what I'm going to do is, because the exhibit, I thought the exhibit was ready, but I got my dates wrong. What I'm going to do is, I'm going to go back, and actually, I'm just going to show you, because there were a couple cool props that they used down in the rows that were really fascinating. There were a couple of old books, and it's weird, but I love old books, just the textures and the page and the format of how the book would work. So I'm just going to show you that. As I was saying, if we go down here, you'll see quite a few props that are actually old. Like, for example, it's not very good lighting here, but this book, The Passing of Flagship, it's been sellotaped shut. Let me find an open book. Here we are. Like this book. Here. Oh, Jesus. Sorry, dear. This is an actual, genuine old prayer book. And it's absolutely beautiful. I mean, the pages are skin thin, you know, and it's marvellous. Beautiful. I love it. I love history. History's always been a friend of mine. And here actually are a lot of things that they would have used in there. In fact, this is a chemist. This is what they would have used for, healing and etc. In fact, here are some of the things you could find at a chemist. You'd find egg powder and silver skin letters and whopping cough embrotiation and dyspepsia tablets. I don't know what that is. You know, celery pills, you know, so it's stuff like that. 3p. Blimey. Or was that 3 shillings? I think it's 3 shillings. I don't think it went to pence until the 1970s. Anyway, that concludes the tour of this wonderful museum.